Should Kyle Larson be granted a playoff waiver? You all wanted to hear my opinion. Let's chat about it. Quite honestly, at this point, I'm shocked we don't have a decision yet. I know as of 2 days ago, Elton Sawyer did say that we don't have a waiver request from Hendrick Motorsports yet, so that could be why this is taking so long as I'm recording this. But as we all know, Kyle Larson this past weekend attempted to do the double. Unfortunately, though, Mother Nature had other plans in mind, delaying the start of the Indy 500 by quite a few hours, impacting Larson's ability to potentially be able to start the Coca-Cola 600. Which meant the team had a tough choice to make. Either they say, hey, listen, per the NASCAR rulebook, we have to start the Coca-Cola 600, so we have to forfeit the Indy 500 and go to the track, weather permitting. If everything was safe and good to go, they would get to the track on time, and everything was smooth sailing from there. Or what they decided to do was say, you know what, we put so much time, effort, money, and energy into running this Indy 500. We're going to do it, stay there, have Justin Allgaier start the Coca-Cola 600 in the number 5, run it as far as he can, and by the time Larson's able to make it to the track safely, Larson would take over where Justin Allgaier left off. Because of their conscious decision to choose the Indy 500 over a NASCAR-sanctioned race, they're in quite the pickle. Because according to the NASCAR rulebook, a driver must start all points-paying races to remain playoff eligible. This means that in order for a driver to remain playoff eligible for the season, they have to start all points-paying races in the regular season, as reported by NBC Sports. Several other credible sources, such as Bob Pockrass, have said the same exact thing with those exact words. So if any driver does not start a NASCAR-sanctioned race that is a points-paying race, they have to request a waiver from NASCAR. So this is the route that Larson now has to take in order to remain playoff eligible. Elton Sawyer on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio talked about how uncharted this territory is, because typically when we see waivers given out, it's due to reasons that are out of a driver's control, such as illness, such as injury. Think back to Alex Bowman and Chase Elliott last year. They were both given waivers after being out of the car for several weeks due to injury to still be able to compete in the playoffs. We've also seen situations where waivers are given for something that is in a driver's control, such as an action that is detrimental to the sport. Think to Chase Elliott back in 2023 when he intentionally wrecked Denny Hamlin at the Coca-Cola 600. He was suspended from the next race, but NASCAR gave him a waiver to continue to compete in the playoffs, though he was suspended. So though some argue that waivers should only be given out in extreme circumstances that are outside of a driver's control, such as illness, maybe death, maybe injury, we also see waivers that are given out for circumstances that are in the driver's control, such as intentionally wrecking a driver. Maybe a driver gets in a fight and they're suspended for a race, but then they get a waiver as well. We've had these situations happen before. So what makes the Larson situation such uncharted territory? Well, Larson and the team decided to consciously miss a NASCAR-sanctioned race knowing the NASCAR rulebook. All these other situations, no one's intentionally missed a race. No one's intentionally not started a race due to one thing or another. That's why this is so different. Ultimately, though, you're watching this video because you want to hear my opinion as to whether I think Larson should or should not get a waiver. And hopefully up to this point, you've watched the entire video. You've heard all the facts I've laid out, all the evidence, all that type of stuff before stitching this or commenting on this video. Obviously, I do want to hear your opinions in the comments below regardless, but I'm leaning towards the side of yes, I do believe NASCAR should give Kyle Larson a waiver. And I don't envy NASCAR for making this decision, because that conscious effort to actively choose to not start the Coca-Cola 600 is really what's going to hinder this decision here. And whatever NASCAR decides, though, they have to be very careful with how they word their decision, because it sets the precedent moving forward. But I do believe that Larson should get a waiver, because I am 95%, maybe if not more percent confident that if weather was not a factor here, Larson would have successfully been able to do the double. There was a lot of time, effort, energy, planning, and yes, money that went into making this effort a success. And if it wasn't for the severe weather in Indy, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Things would have started on time and things would have been good to go. So when we talk about reasons as to why NASCAR could give a waiver to Kyle Larson, we look at that section of waivers that are given out for like unforeseen circumstances out of a driver's control. Well, in this case, though, it's not injury or illness or something else that's very extreme or maybe personal. We do have a situation that is out of the driver and everyone involves control, which is weather. So all that to say, because of weather, you could argue that the team was forced to make a decision to stay in Indy versus starting the Coca-Cola 600. And that would be the reasoning as to why. And I cannot stress this enough that when NASCAR makes this decision, whatever decision they make, they have to be very careful with how they word their reasoning. And if they decide that Larson does deserve the waiver, they have to be very specific as to why he does, because it sets the precedent moving forward. The main reasoning I've seen as to why Larson deserves a waiver is because he's one of the best drivers in the world. There was so much money put into this. There was so much effort put into this. It was great publicity for the sport. I personally don't believe that somebody getting a waiver should ever be because of good PR, money, and or how talented a driver is. You're going to say, oh, sorry, no. So NASCAR has to be very specific as to saying in the future, okay, we're only going to give waivers in this situation if it's the Indy 500 or something like that. But regardless, I don't think a waiver should ever be given out for those three reasons. I think that's a lot of privilege as to why you would give out a waiver. So I don't like that reasoning at all. Not to argue that Kyle Larson is not one of the best drivers in the world, because he definitely is. Not to argue that there wasn't a lot of money put into this and that it didn't give the sport a lot of PR, because there was a lot of money put into this, and this did give the sport and IndyCar a lot of good PR. But to give somebody a waiver for those three reasons, I think is crap. I don't like that reasoning at all, or that justification. And if that's the reasoning, it sets a precedent moving forward saying, hey, any other driver who wants to miss a race on a given Sunday that can provide those three things can go and miss out on a race and then apply for a waiver and get it. It's NASCAR trying to balance opportunity versus fairness is ultimately what it comes down to in my mind. So yet again, if NASCAR grants Kyle Larson a waiver, it should be centered around the extreme circumstance of weather. But whatever NASCAR decides to do, it will set expectations moving forward, so this will not be as big of an argument as it is now, as it could be in the future when something similar could potentially happen. All of that to say, I hope I made my points very clear. I clarified some things, and hopefully very soon we do hear an opinion as to whether Kyle Larson is or is not granted a waiver by NASCAR. You can catch all of that, of course, at TobyChristie.com, and I will update you on all my social media pages. But in the meantime, go to AboveTheYellowLine.com to learn more about us, what we do, and of course our live streams every Thursday night to talk with us live about the latest in NASCAR.